Uh, so very good morning, afternoon, or evening to everyone who is listening to this debut podcast of mine. And I'm very happy that today we are joined by Dr. Prabhakar Rao, who's done so much for our planet and in his extremely long career. And I believe that more than a career, it is something that is close to his heart. Um, as of now, Mr. Prabhakar Rao is a trustee at the Sri Sri Institute of Agricultural Sciences and Technology Trust. I would like to just dive in directly without giving too much of an introduction because I know that every little detail will emerge as we speak today. And yes, so to begin with, you are a trustee at SSIAST, as I just said. Could you briefly explain the vision of SSIAST and your role there? And you've joined them after a 30-year long career, am I right?
Yeah. So, Harshini, lovely to be here with you on your inaugural podcast. It does feel very special, and I'm honored to be here. Basically, what does SSIST try to do? We are looking how to give sustainable options for agriculture to farmers who have got sort of completely put against the wall with chemical farming. So there are a lot of farmers out there. We work with about 22 lakh farmers. That's 2.2 million farmers across the country. And these are farmers who have been doing chemical farming, but are now looking for a way out, an alternative, which would be more sustainable in all dimensions, whether it's the health of the soil or whether it's the risk mitigation, whether it's combating climate change, whether it's the health of their family and themselves. So farmers who are looking for alternative sustainable models for agriculture, they are the ones that we are working with presently, about 2.2 million. And our vision is to bring at least 10% of the population in the next 5 years, to bring 10% of the farmers in the country adopt what we call Sri Sri natural farming, which is based on the Vedic agriculture, very scientific methods which create a very sustainable model. So we are working in that, and that's basically our vision. Our basic vision is to revive a model that has been in existence for at least 10,000 years in this country, which served us very well till as late as less than a century ago. And to revive that model and bring it into mainstream. So that is what the trust has envisioned.
Right. And why do you think, and of course, we know that it's a matter of utmost urgency. So, could you throw some light on why this is so important at the moment?
Well, multiple things. I mean, today, if you look at the awareness there is towards eating healthy food, okay? Now, you are dealing with this podcast, which essentially runs on the tenet you are what you eat, right? So, if you are going to eat food that is devoid of toxins, serious toxic chemical residues, automatically whatever you eat is going to have a better impact on your health. So the effect of toxins or toxic residues from agrochemicals in our food is one of the driving reasons why people are looking for alternatives. This is at the consumer end.
Mhm.
At the farmer's level, what is happening is that he has found that the productivity of his land, the natural productivity of his land has gone down, and it asks for increasing quanta of chemicals to just sustain yields. So it is like 10 years ago, if he was applying 10 10 kilos of urea per acre, today he is applying 25 quintals per, 25 kilos per acre.
Right.
So that loop of the soil demanding more and more agrochemical to sustain yield levels is what causes diminishing economic returns. And more than diminishing economic returns, for a farmer, it increases his risk. So if a farmer has to invest, let's say, 200,000 Indian rupees for an acre of cultivation because of the high input of agrochemicals, the risk, if that crop does not succeed for whatever reason, he will not be able to sustain that loss. So it's not just the cost increasing, but the risk exposure, which ultimately translates into farmer suicides and all those kind of things. It's the rural migration to the urban cities. People, this next generation of rural youth not wanting to take up agriculture. So all these are looped in. So that is another issue. Now, the next issue that we have is in terms of climate change. What is happening? When we have extreme oscillations of weather, when we have extreme precipitation and we have extreme drought, now these cycles are going to only become more extreme as the years go by. Now, when there is extreme precipitation, for example, because of the use of excessive use of chemical fertilizers, the soil has become very hard. It's lost its porosity. It's lost its water holding capacity. So what happens is you get runoff.
Right.
So that runoff translates to floods. It translates to erosion of topsoil, which is very essential in agriculture. It also amounts to a lot of fertilizer that gets washed downstream into ponds, into lakes, into the sea, into the rivers, even into the aquifers, the underground aquifers that we have. So that causes the toxicity and the imbalance in the health of the water that's there. And then loss of biodiversity, When we are using industrial agriculture, we are essentially resorting to monocropping. We just use the same hybrids again and again and again. And that's what happens in the most productive states in India. In Punjab, if you take, it's wheat in winter and rice in summer, and that's it. You will find hundreds of kilometers you can drive, and that's all you see. You just see rice in summer and you see wheat in winter, and that's all they grow. Now, when you're doing that, what happens to all the other biodiversity of food crops? What happens to biodiversity of vegetables? They're gone. They're just gone. So from multiple viewpoints, if you look at it, the imperative to find an alternate system of agriculture that is sustainable, that is planet friendly, environmentally friendly, and which has also got the risk mitigation for the farmer. That becomes an imperative. And that is why people start to look at, alternatives like natural farming.
And what are the basic principles of natural farming? From what I read, it is chemical free and it is zero budget, but you have inputs like Jivamrit and Bijamrit. So how does it work? And also, what is the difference between organic and natural?
Yeah. So organic is a generic term that is used to denote any form of agriculture which does not use chemicals. Yeah. So if you have biodynamic farming, or you've got Fukuoka's do nothing farming, you've got natural farming, and you've got organic farming. Okay. All this comes under a broad category called organic farming, because organic equals chemical free. But the actual organic farming in India, which only came into India in 1940 through Sir Albert Howard, who introduced it in the central India in a town called Indore, and then it became known as the Indore method of composting.
Right.
That organic farming essentially rests on the application of what is called farmyard manure, which is composted organic matter, which is applied to soil, and it is to as an alternative to using chemicals. Now, that is what organic farming is specifically. Natural farming essentially means allowing nature to do what it knows best. If you take, for example, a forest, nobody is going and putting urea or NPK or anything. Nobody is spraying pesticides or nematicides or anything there. And yet everything is growing so luxuriantly. So what is it that is operating there? That is the interaction between the microbes in the soil, which are bacteria, fungi. You have, protozoans. You've got microscopic worms and insects, and you've got all that ecosystem which you don't see under the soil. That ecosystem we seek to re-establish in agricultural land. So we introduce live microbes. It's the only system of agriculture where live microbes are introduced into the soil. So you take fresh cow dung, you can take cow urine, you take some protein source like the flour of a pulse, any legume flour, and then you have some sugar source like jaggery or molasses or whatever, and then you create these biological formulations, the names of which you mentioned, like Jivamrita, Ganajivamrita, Bijamrita, Panchagavya. These are formulations, but essentially, what is the principle? The principle is that we are taking those microbes from the gut of the cow and we are exploding it exponentially, many million times over in a very short period, couple of days. And then we filter that, dilute that, and put those microbes directly into the soil. Now, why is this to be done? Because these microbes have the capacity to break down complex minerals to release nutrients. So when you take a handful of soil, that handful of soil, the majority of that soil is mineral. Minerals are complex chemical compounds which have all the nutrients that the plant wants. There is nitrogen, there is phosphorus, there's potassium, there is copper and zinc and iron and whatever else that the plant needs. But they are all held in a chelated form, which means they are bound. They cannot be absorbed by the plant directly because they are held. And that's how nature preserves these nutrients, because otherwise, if everything was in a soluble form, one rain and everything will go into the sea. So nature actually makes them into these chelated minerals and keeps them there. And then it's these microbes, what we call the the nutrient solubilizing microbes, the NSMs. The NSMs then go and break these complex salts, complex minerals, to release what the plant wants. The plant wants a nitrogen or phosphorus or potash or whatever. The microbes do this release, this breakdown and release of the nutrients. And the plant in return rewards them with a molecule of sugar. So it's a symbiotic relationship between the plants and the microbes. And then you have the fungi, which have this huge network of mycelia under the ground, where all these broken minerals, etc., they are getting transported. The food for the microbes, which is the sugar, is getting transported. So there's a huge internet web that's there, which is doing all this, transport chain, supply chain and demand chain is being met by these fungal mycelia. So these fungi and these bacteria and these microbes all work together to really use what is there in the soil. You do not need to bring in soluble chemical fertilizer once you have the microbes in place. So that's the first pillar of natural farming. Now, for the microbes to remain there on the soil, they have to operate in the first 30 centimeters, first foot, 1 foot of soil. That's where maximum nutrient absorption takes place for any plant. Whether it's a tree that's 100 foot tall or whatever, nutrient absorption takes place, maximum nutrient absorption takes place right on top. It's in the top soil, roughly around 30 centimeters depth. That's where it takes. So we want all our microbes to be there. Now, for the microbes to be there, the microbes don't like direct sunlight. So if there's direct sunlight falling on the soil, they migrate down. Then they become useless to the plant. So the second pillar of natural farming is to mulch the soil. You mulch it with leaves, you mulch it with straw, you mulch it with wood chips, wood shavings, any organic matter that will decompose. Even cardboard cartons, for example, will work effectively as mulch. So once you have the mulch, the nutrient solubilizing microbes, they work in that zone where they need to work. Now, that's the second pillar of natural farming. Now, when you have these two, when you have mulch and you've got the microbes, the third pillar of natural farming comes in, which is the earthworm. The moment you put in these fresh microbes into the soil and mulch, within 48 hours, earthworms will appear. And this is something extraordinary because these earthworms go up and down 2 meters every day. They're just a tube. They take soil in from the front and then they give it out from behind. So it's just a tube that's going up and down. Yeah. So it's then the earthworms which also mix the soil with these nutrient solubilizing microbes and create porosity. So there's tremendous amount of porosity that's created because of these microbes. So that's the third pillar of natural farming. The fourth pillar of natural farming is that we never do monoculture. We never do monoculture. If you go to a agricultural land which is doing natural farming, you will find at least 4 to 10 different types of crops being grown together. Well, that's how nature meant to. You go to a forest, a natural virgin forest, never you will see the same tree over a given piece of land. You have tall trees, you've got medium trees, you've got the undergrowths, you've got the shrubs, you've got the moss and the lichens. I mean, there's a whole ecosystem of various species that are coexisting in a given environment. Natural farming seeks to recreate that. So we have different crops which grow synergistically. Some crops need more sunlight, so they would be occupying the upper canopy. You will have some which need filtered light, so they'll be in the mid canopy. Some plants would require very little light, so they would be right at the like ground cover, like spinach, for example, or methi, fenugreek, and all these things. You grow them. Mint, for example, can grow very nicely in shade. But it's a shade of another crop. Of a couple of crops. Then you have plants which absorb nutrients from various depths in the soil. Yeah, some right on top, the first 2 centimeters. Some maybe 15 centimeters. Some could be 30 centimeters. So you put them synergistically. And then the duration of the crops is different. The water regimes that the crops want are different. Some need more water, some need less water. So you make that synergy where 2 plus 2 is 22. 2 plus 2 is not 4, it's 22. So when you do that, you've got the fourth pillar of natural farming. The fifth pillar of natural farming is use of indigenous seeds. Because natural farming depends on the use of indigenous seeds. Because when you grow a heirloom variety of crop, it grows at the pace nature intended it to. It's not like a hybrid, which grows in 50% of the time, giving you 100% more yield.
I'd also like to interject here because I've read that genetically modified seeds are sterile in that they don't yield more seeds. So the farmer is dependent that he has to constantly keep buying seeds. And they also require more inputs, chemical inputs.
Yeah, so it's not just GMOs, hybrid seeds, for example. Now, all the vegetable that you eat is only hybrid. Now, there are seeds inside the vegetable, for sure. But if you plant them, every seed will give to a rise to a different kind of a plant. It's of no use to the farmer. Yeah. Some will yield different kind of fruit. Some will yield very few fruits. Some will yield a lot of leaves. Every seed is going to give you a different kind of a plant. Yeah. So hybrid seeds itself cannot be saved by farmers. You have to buy them every generation. Now, in GMO, the situations become a lot more serious because they have introduced a gene which they call the Terminator gene, which essentially makes the seed sterile. So even if you took the seeds from a tomato, a GMO tomato, and plant it, it won't germinate. So you've given the farmer no choice but to go and buy every season the seeds. But the reason natural farming favors heirloom varieties is it puts the power back in the hands of the farmer because he becomes the seed keeper. And that's how it should be. Nature's seeds, which have been developed over millions of years, they are the birthright of every human being on this planet. It can't become proprietary of an individual or a company or a corporate. This is everybody's. This is what nature has bestowed on us. Nobody should be able to go and patent that, right? So use of heirlooms first of all does that, but more importantly, heirlooms grow at a pace which nature intended. So you do not have to put chemical fertilizer to grow that. In fact, if you put urea while growing an indigenous variety of crop, food crop, it will just bolt, it'll just, sort of shoot up, become vegetative. One wind or one storm, the whole thing will collapse. Because nature never meant it to grow that way. So in terms of sustainability, what you're doing is you're allowing the crop to grow at the pace nature intended it to. If a child is to be born, it takes 9 months. You can't pump hormones and say, listen, I'm going to take this child out in 3 months, right? You can't do that. Yeah. And if you do that, you're doing something terribly wrong because the demand it will then put on the mother. If a child that took 9 months to grow needs to grow in 3 months, the demand on the resources it will put on the mother will probably kill the mother. And that's exactly what happens with the soil. When you're forcing hybrids and GMOs to suck up nutrition at an enormous rate just because they need to grow fast and give more yield, you are actually killing the soil. Because the moment you put that chemical, all the microbes are gone. So you've got a sterile medium, growth medium, which is addicted to fertilizer. If you don't put fertilizer, there's no result. Yeah. So the fifth component of natural farming, and that's the one, the last one, is the use of indigenous seeds. So these are the five: the microbes, the mulching, the earthworms, mixed cropping, and use of indigenous heirloom seeds. These five pillars they are the foundational pillars of natural farming. And essentially, what are we saying? We get out of the way, let nature do what it knows best, and you will have a sustainable form of agriculture.
So this is really cool, and it's really interesting. So when I was in my master's, I was doing my master's thesis on organic agriculture, and I always had this argument with my economics professor, and he would say that, how are you going to feed so many people with organic farming? What about the yield? And like, he would never yield to my arguments that the fundamentals are wrong for chemical farming. So, how would you say that natural farming would rise up to feeding 7 billion people on the planet?
So yeah, this is the question that I always have to bang my head against, because when I go to the policymakers in the country, we call that the the South Bloc, which is the central government who make the policy on agriculture. When you go and speak to those guys, they will listen to you very nicely. They'd probably offer you a cup of coffee as well. But at the end of it, they say, all this is very nice, Dr. Rao, but who is going to feed the nation? So the question is, if you're going to move away from chemical farming, how are you going to get food security? Okay. So my counter argument to this is basically, are you talking about nutritional security, or are you talking about food security? Food security just means the total production. It is how many tons of food that have been produced over a unit time. Okay, so annual production was so many tons, therefore India is secure food wise. But are we nutritionally secure? That is a huge question, right? A, we are producing this food which is there in quantity, but it is having toxic residues. And enough data is there today which directly relates present day modern illnesses. You take autism, you take Parkinson's, you take Alzheimer's, you take so many forms of cancer, you take this new one that they call the non-alcoholic fatty liver. Everybody knows that these are directly related to the newer types of chemicals that we're using. Autism and the use of glyphosate, which is Roundup, which is a very toxic weedicide, it's been documented. You can go to Google Scholars and just put a search, autism and glyphosate, and it will give you so many new research papers, not hearsay. These are actual research that's been done. So you say you're giving security, food security to the nation, but are you giving them health? First point. Second point is, all this wheat and rice that you keep growing, is that going to give balanced food to the nation? What happens to the pulses? What happens to the oil seeds? What happens to vegetables? What happens to the greens? Again, you need to look at how do you balance this? And that's what natural farming does. Next point. We have this example of a variety of wheat that used to be grown from about 2000 years ago, or even more. At least it's been documented from 2000 years in India, long before the Green Revolution happened. And it's a wheat that's round. It actually belongs to a species called Triticum spherococcum, which means round. And yeah, it's a round wheat. And we managed to revive this variety, which had almost gone extinct. And then it was given the name Sonamooti by the founder of the Art of Living Foundation. He called it Sonamooti because it was golden in color and it was round. So he called it the golden pearl. Now, when you do the nutritional analysis of this Sonamooti grain, you find that it has folic acid. It has got everything like protein, minerals, everything, at least into 3x, 3 times or more than your hybrid wheat. So although my yield per acre is roughly around 25% less than hybrid wheat, which is grown using chemicals. This one, we don't use chemicals. Okay. So while we are clocking roughly around 12 quintals per acre, okay, the national average being somewhere between 15, 16 quintals per acre. So roughly around a 25% drop in the yield. In terms of nutrition per acre, I have got nutrition that is more than double. So if I took a hectare of Sonamooti wheat and compared what it did for the nutrition of the country vis-a-vis hybrid wheat, we would then understand how wrong we are in talking about yield per acre. We need to talk about health per acre. So if the government, and it's very true, because if I normally would eat, let's say, 3 breads, chapatis made out of hybrid wheat, I can hardly stuff 1 or 1.5 made from Sonamooti because it's just so filling in my stomach. I eat 1 or 1.5 and I'm full. I don't need to eat 3 or 4 chapatis, right? And this is not just unique to Sonamooti. It's unique to every heirloom food crop that's grown by man. Ask anybody how you feel when you eat something that's heirloom and something that's hybrid. This one's a tasteless glob of carbohydrate and protein, but that is packed. It's packed with taste, it's packed with nutrition, and it gives you a sense of fullness. So we get carried away with this concept of yield per acre, which is a disaster. We should be talking about health per acre. And then we are playing apples and apples and oranges and oranges. Because up to today, there's not one study that's been done with all the agriculture institutes and all the universities that we have, where they've tested a heirloom variety grown without fertilizer vis-a-vis a hybrid grown with fertilizer. So when they have a field trial, what they do is they take my heirloom variety, but they put fertilizer, which destroys that plant. It just bolts, and I said, like one wind or one rain, everything collapses. And they say, look, it's a variety that doesn't yield. But had they grown it the way we would grow it, and had they tested it on the same regime, experimental regime that we are doing this for the hybrid, then you would compare apples with apples. So this illusion of feeding people, are you giving them food or are you giving them health and nutrition? If we ask that question, because that is the question to ask, the answer stares at your face. The answer is on the wall. It's staring at you. So I believe that this paradigm shift has to happen. People really have to think about this. And people have started to think about this. Europe, for example, is seriously looking to import these kind of sustainable agriculture technologies. You have a scheme that's called Horizon 2020. It's grant funding from the EU Commission for research and work for sustainable agriculture in what they call a closed loop. They call it a circular bio models, circular bioeconomy, as you call it. Yeah, the circular bioeconomy, natural farming is exactly that, where the waste goes back as input, and then everything goes. It's a closed loop. where you're not destroying anything, you're adding anything. So even Europe, uh, they are really thinking about this. And they're thinking about how can we do more sustainable forms of agriculture, because they realize that this is a one-way street. GMOs and all that you have, yes, the arguments are very powerful. Who's going to feed the 7 billion people? It's a powerful argument. But when you go a little deeper into that, you find there are tremendous flaws in that argument. And policymakers are aware of this. And that is why they are talking about, circular bioeconomy. And they're giving millions of euros to fund research where sustainable models. I'm collaborating with a couple of these projects, to see how we can bring this sustainable, model there. So I think that sort of answers the question that you asked about who's going to feed the nation.
Yeah, definitely. And the thing is, there are two more things that I'd like to ask you. One is that I have read that this is a social system, in that the system of natural farming that you created involves the entire community. Involves the YLTP, the youth leadership training, that is the Yuvacharyas as you call them. It involves their support and it involves the community. So how much does one need to contribute in order for this to work? And when I say one, I mean both the villager or where the farms are, and also as a lay person. So that is one question. And secondly, I've noticed that also Jivamrit.
Yeah, can I answer that question?
Yes,
Then
sure.
we'll get to the next one. Yeah. So when we work with farmers, first of all, we don't work with one farmer. The first thing we do is to create a farmer cluster. Typically, a farmer cluster size would be anywhere between 25 farmers to even 500 farmers. So first of all, we create a cluster of farmers. And this is very essential because the organic certification that we give is also through a system which is from the government of India, which is called participatory guidance system. Europe has that. France, for example, has a PGS system where farmers guarantee each other's produce to say that, yeah, this is good food, it's been grown without chemicals. So that PGS system requires a cluster of farmers. So we, first of all, do not work with single farmers, we work with clusters. And the reason is exactly what you said, because natural farming is done best when the community works together. Because yes, every farmer can make Jivamrita, but if a group of farmers make it collectively for the entire village, it makes so much more sense. Every farmer could be a seed keeper, but when collectively there are groups of farmers who are saving seeds of specific varieties, heirloom varieties, it works so much better. Agriculture output, the bargaining power, when you have the produce of one farmer versus 500 farmers, when that's pooled together, the bargaining capacity or the bargaining clout that the cluster has is much more than one farmer. And then there is work for everybody, especially the youth. So we have a program called the Youth Leadership Training Program. And in this, what do we do is we identify village youth and they are empowered to take leadership roles for their village. So somebody might do some value addition. They might dry the produce, pack it, grade it and pack it. That adds huge value addition to the product. And then it takes away the panic of shelf life. A farmer's biggest threat is that he has to sell before it rots. Whereas when you do some value addition, then all those get mitigated to a great extent. So we talk about all these kinds of roles where the community engagement is there. Yeah. And in Indian villages, the biggest proponents we have are the women farmers. Because for the women farmer, when we are doing mixed cropping, there is income coming almost every week. Every week there is something to harvest. As against, you just grow wheat and rice, which just gets harvested twice a year. Yeah. And then when the man goes and sells his entire harvest for the season, there's money coming in at one time. The women find that very, very risky. A, the man may misspend that money. Two, for a woman, the security is when there is money coming in all the time. So the whole community involvement is there when natural farming is adopted by the community. So that's just how it is, and that's how actually agriculture was done for thousands and thousands of years in the country. It's only in the recent past that it became very individualistic, each guy doing his own thing. But it was never like that. It was always a community effort, and we believe that this will bring that back.
And what role does a lay person have? Like in the cities, we are only just consumers. A few of us do terrace farming at the most. But does it require city people who are living in the city to contribute? And if they want to contribute, how can they help?
Yeah. So when we talk about natural farming, first of all, to incentivize the farmer to continue with natural farming, a demand has to be created by the urban consumer. So the urban consumer must first know about indigenous crops. Like, for example, people should know about Sonamooti, that it's low gluten, it's very low glycemic. So it's got, it's very good for people who have diabetes, gluten allergies, things like that. So a premium for the product gets created in the urban sector. Then two, you have so many indigenous vegetable varieties that you don't see in the market. These are indigenous heirlooms. You go to farmers markets in Europe, for example, on a Sunday, you will find vegetables you don't see in the supermarket. Right? Now, if I have to talk about, like recently, I was responsible for reviving a variety of bean that is called clove bean, because it's shaped like a clove. The bean itself is shaped like a clove. And in the 1950s, there was a cookery book that was written by a very famous South Indian lady by the name Meenakshi Ammal. And it was called Sametyupar, which literally translated cook and see. And it was a book that was given to all newly wed brides, and it was on vegetarian cooking. Now, there was a dish there which talked about this particular bean, but this bean is just not there in the market today. So I went looking for this and finally managed to find some seeds of this particular bean, and then I brought it and then stabilized it. And now today, I have got seeds of this clove bean, which I am now giving online. Now, when people start to grow this, now who has to grow this first? It's not the farmer, because if my farmer grew this clove bean and took it to the market, nobody would buy it because they don't even know what it is. But when the urban gardeners start to grow it, they start to pluck those clove beans and make Meenakshi Ammal's dish, which disappeared, I don't know how many years ago, because the vegetable was no more there. Then the awareness through social media can be created that this is a wonderful vegetable with this magnificent taste. And here you are reviving a culinary heritage by using this vegetable. So once that awareness for this vegetable starts to percolate in the urban consumer, then my farmer can cultivate it and expect that to be bought for a decent price by the consumer. So the urban consumer has a huge role in reviving biodiversity or preserving whatever little is left of the biodiversity in our food crops. So it's the urban consumer who, even if you have one or two pots in your balcony or in your terrace or whatever, you grow these heirloom varieties. You post it in your social media. You talk about it. You tell people that, hey, look at this pumpkin. It's shaped like an apple. It's green and it looks like an apple, and it's called an apple pumpkin. And this wonderful pumpkin, can be used, in these dishes. Then you created a demand for that particular food, heirloom variety. Then, once the farmer starts to grow it, we can say that this variety will never disappear from the planet Earth, right? So the urban gardener has got a huge responsibility in ensuring that we preserve whatever biodiversity is left on this planet.
That's a really cool insight. And apart from that, what are the challenges that you see natural farming faces, and how can we collectively overcome them? Because from what I read, it said that the technology transfer to processing is a challenge that you're facing. The website for Sri Sri Institute says that. So would you say that that's the challenge, or if not, what are the challenges and how can we overcome them?
See, basically, I think challenges, it's dissemination of awareness. Yeah. Today, I said we work with 2.2 million farmers. Yeah, it sounds like a big number, but when you take the entire population of farmers in the country, which is roughly around 600 million plus, it's nothing. And I am very sure that a huge percentage of those 600 million farmers are desperately looking for alternatives to chemical farming. So it's basically it has to be driven by policymakers at the national level, at the governmental level. Thankfully, the present government seems to be a little more sensitive to this. They've actually, in the last budget, the Indian budget, they actually mentioned for the first time ever natural farming.
Mhm.
Never has government actually acknowledged natural farming, but this was the first budget where they said we are setting aside X amount of money for promoting or creating awareness for natural farming. So winds are changing. I mean, there's no doubt about it, but it's still very slow. Yeah. So we believe in Art of Living that this can be done best when the consumers in the urban sector and the farmers in the rural sector directly connect.
Mhm.
You see, when we start doing, and thanks to COVID, that's already started to happen in the country now. Farmers are reaching out directly to end users, taking the middlemen out of the way. New laws that have come in have allowed interstate transport of agriculture commodities. Farmers are not bound to sell it to the same monopolistic, middlemen. So there's a whole lot of things that are happening, but all that points to a much more robust supply chain linkage between the farmers and the consumers. So if we can further work on that, and this has to be driven by technology, so what kind of apps or what kind of IoT internet enabled systems we can have that can create this kind of forecasting, knowing how much food is being produced, what is being produced where, and in the next 1 month, in the next 2 months, in the next fortnight, what's going to come readily to the end user, what's going to be available. This kind of forecasting we don't have at the moment. So when you start talking about decentralized production, where you have the urban hubs, but all that's consumed by the urban hub comes within a radius of
Mhm.
cultivation, instead of bring shipping it all across the country just because it's grown in larger quantity there. So when you create these sort of decentralized production hubs across the country, that's where I believe natural farming will automatically find its niche.
Mhm.
Because if the consumer starts to ask for what he wants, if the consumer says, I want food that is not chemically farmed, I want food that is heirloom, I want food that is, whatever. Once that demand starts to happen, then the supply will take care of itself. Today, we don't have that because we just have this habit of going to the supermarket and we just pick up what is there. It's not like we say we want this,
Mhm.
but that's changing now, and people are starting to demand. A lot of people are starting to demand what they want, and I think that'll be a good paradigm shift one can look forward to.
Right. And when it comes to the Jivamrit, is it necessary that it has to come from an A2 cow rather than an A1 cow, or how would it work? Because there is a huge shortage of the indigenous cow. So,
Yeah, so essentially, when we were talking about transfer of this technology to the European Union, we again, I mean, this was the first, obstacle that you hit, because where are the Bos indicus cows? You have only the Bos taurus derivatives, the Western Holsteins, Hessian, Friesian cows. Where is the indicus? Where are the Bos indicus descendants? Where are the zebu cows, as we call them? Where are they? Now, the good point is that zebu cows are available all over the world. Like in Europe, for example, in Bulgaria, we found that they have got native cows which have been there for centuries. And these are with cow herders who take it up the mountains during summer, they come down during the winter, and they do what is called free grazing. So, what we found in our research was it's this free grazing that is essential. It's not so important whether the cow is Bos indicus or Bos taurus, but the cow has to be a free grazing cow. Bos indicus cows are by nature free grazing. You can't give processed food to Bos indicus, like a Gir cow, for example, an indigenous cow. You can't give it processed food, it won't eat it. It needs to graze. So, the microbial biodiversity in the gut of the animal is largely dependent on whether it's free grazing or not. So, in Europe, almost all the cows are not free grazing, they are fed. But then you have farmers who actually go for free grazing cows. So it's not so important that you need Bos indicus or Bos taurus gene pool, but it's whether the cow is free grazing or not. And zebu cows are available across Europe. Even now, you will find that native breeds are there which have been there for centuries. They have not been hybridized, and they all graze. They are all free grazers. They don't eat processed food. You can't, even if you give them processed food, they don't eat it because they just can't take it. So, um, so I believe that is the key differentiator. I don't think this entire myth of, oh no, it's only the desi cow or the indigenous Indian cow which can do natural farming and no other cow will do. I don't think it's that. I think it's what and how that cow feeds. And if it's a free grazing cow, I think we have a very good potential of using the cow dung from that cow to produce live microbes and multiply them and apply it to the soil.
right. Thank you for that. That was a really, really interesting insight. And it was a question that was lingering in my mind for a long time as well. So finally, my last question to you would be: what are your next steps in the near future? What have you planned to take it forward?
Okay. So personally, my passion is to make indigenous heirloom seed production a commercially profitable
Mhm.
uh, venture. Right now, it is not, because if I gave you 10 of my seeds, you could make 10,000 of those seeds, sell it. The person who bought it could make 10,000 more from each seed and sell it. But I get nothing out of it, right? Therefore, I don't have any incentive to multiply seeds in large quantities as a commercial business. I just multiply enough for my needs and maybe a little extra to share with some other farmers. And this has been the bane of indigenous seed production, because every time we create a farmer cluster, the farmers have lost the tradition of seed keeping. So when I tell them, take a small quantity of seed, multiply it, then you will have enough seed to put for large acreage of land. Yeah. They don't have the patience. They want seed now. If they have to grow tomato, they want 8,000 seeds now per acre. They want 20,000 seeds per hectare. Yeah. They don't want to wait 2 seasons to multiply that quantity. Yeah. They want it now, but it's not available. So while there is a huge demand for native seeds, the production is not there, because I can sell it once, but after that, I don't, they can make their own seed. So I don't see. So hybrid and GMO seed industry thrives on the fact that the farmer will buy it every season. So how do I make the production of indigenous seeds a sustainable, profitable commercial activity? So for that, I need to use technology. So what we have done is we've created a logic architecture where each generation of farmer who multiplies seed, the entire documentation, the tracing is there. And every time seed gets multiplied and sold, a small fraction of that will go back to the previous generations of farmers. Just like, you write a book, it gets reprinted many times, but each time it is sold, the print is sold, you get your royalty, right?
Mhm.
Similarly, farmers across, generations of multiplication, each of them will get small amount, but because the base of the pyramid becomes big, it actually translates into a significant amount of money. But
Right.
to have such a platform, such a logic architecture, you need to use technologies like blockchain, smart contracts, so where you have traceability using blockchain, you can have very clear traceability. Who was the first guy who introduced this, who multiplied it, second generation of farmers, third generation, you can have that entire, sort of pedigree that's neatly charted. You have smart contracts where you don't have to look at who multiplied what, but whenever the sale happens into your account, a fraction of that money gets transferred automatically using the united payment interfaces that are already there in the country. So we believe that if something like this can really be started at a significant scalable level, then you will have farmers actually starting to produce heirloom seeds in quantity, which would then drive the usage of these heirloom seeds in natural farming. So right now it's the seeds are not there in quantity, and that's the biggest bottleneck.
Mhm.
So if we can start to do this using such a logic architecture, then I think it would be very significant for the large scale deployment of natural farming in the country.
So you've already developed this logic architecture, or are you looking for someone to develop it?
No, I've developed the logic architecture, but to develop the software platform,
Mhm.
which incorporates The United Payment Interface is already there in the country. I mean, all the uh, payment providers, payment gateways use it. It's already there. All the farmer accounts, you have this Jandan accounts, the farmer accounts. I mean, significant. The government was saying that 75-80% of the farmers today have bank accounts, and that's all there. So the infrastructure is there, but just to create this blockchain and the smart contract, integration on an existing platform. We have the direct subsidy transfer, which is already, the platform is already there. So how the money gets routed it's already there in the country. So we need people who can come and integrate the blockchain for traceability and the smart contract so that it's watertight. Every time a sale happens, what has to happen will happen. Integrate that into the existing platforms that are there in the country so that we have a nationwide platform for production of indigenous seeds, which are properly tracked. So that's how that needs to be done. So while we have the logic architecture, the integration of the software, it's something that we are still looking to do.
Okay. Thank you. And I will also put the word out, and let's say that if there's someone interested, then would it be okay if they got in touch with you?
Absolutely, absolutely. Please share the coordinates, and we look forward to collaborating with people. Absolutely.
Great. And finally, do you welcome the new? Okay, I'll put it this way. What are the implications of the new farming reforms in India on natural farming? And this is my last question.
I believe that the farm acts, the three farm laws, the new farm laws that have come in, will actually help natural farming. Because right now, this entire concept of this minimum support price, the one which is right now politically so, volatile right now, highly being debated very highly. MSP promotes monoculture. MSP in Punjab has resulted in the farmer growing only two crops, wheat and rice. And whatever is grown has to be bought by the government at a price that is fixed, negotiated by the farmer with the government. And then the government sells it back to the people at a huge subsidy. If we are buying wheat at 20 rupees, then through the fair price distribution system, that wheat is again sold back to people at 2 rupees, a tenth of the price. The rest of the 18 rupees are actually from the taxpayers' money. The subsidy is not government's, it's the taxpayer who subsidizes the entire thing. So why are we promoting this sort of monoculture, providing huge subsidies, and then getting the taxpayer to bear the burden? Mm-hmm. I believe that when the farmer has got the liberty to grow what he wants, to sell it to whom he likes, you've really opened a huge window for the farmers. Today, the farmer grows only wheat and rice because the government's going to pick it up. But if the farmer wants to, even if the farmer wants to, for example, grow sunflower, mm-hmm. he says, why should I do that? Because the government won't give me a minimum support price for sunflower. So I think the farm laws that have been introduced now, I think these will radically shift, because when a farmer can sell directly to whosoever he chooses, I believe then demand will drive the cultivation. And that's when I said, if the urban linkage becomes robust, you know, then automatically my farmers will grow what the consumer wants. And he won't be looking for minimum support price to do that, because he's going to get a good price anyway. So
Right.
I believe it will impact uh, different types of farming. And I think that dependence on only industrial chemical agriculture, that will, reach its logical end. But other farming techniques, be it organic, biodynamic, or natural farming or zero budget farming, uh, I think people are going to start asking for that. You know, so I think that's going to be a huge shift in the country.
Right. I think that we can yeah, we can close the interview over here. It has been really a very, very insightful 1 hour, and I think that that you've really spoken in a detailed and a precise way about natural farming, and basically something that is really relevant to mankind right now. Because, well, yeah, so many people are facing the effects of chemicals in food, not just in India, across the world. And many countries have banned glyphosate as well. So the issues that we've addressed today are extremely relevant, and all of us really, both as consumers and as farmers, we really need to introspect on this and kind of work to take a next step to save our planet, save our health, and of course, evolve in a sustainable way. So thank you so much for taking the time off to speak to me today, and I'm very, very happy that that it is this topic that we address in the first podcast.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me, and you have a good day, and all our listeners as well.